All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Full Circle here with the round of 16 recap and quarterfinals predictions for this week of OWC. I'm Dio. I'm joined by Doomsday and iFlame for the recap and a couple of other people for the predictions this week. How's it going, gents?
What's up? What's up? Hey, it's nice to be back on. Thanks for inviting us on to another episode. It's one rotation around the sun and back on again.
No, it certainly is. It was an interesting week. There were a
Mhm.
couple surprising performances for sure.
Yeah, I guess we can start off with the first match that we have up here, Sweden versus Malaysia. This matchup was, I think, just a big surprise for a lot of people in terms of the scoreline, right? Sweden still ended up winning this match, but you have Malaysia taking their first point on this No Mod 2 pick that we see here, winning the Free Mod 1 immediately afterwards, winning the DT 1 immediately afterwards. So they started this match up 3-1, and then Skilla got angry, and things proceeded, I think, as according to plan for Sweden at that point. But the early stages of this match were really, really cool to watch.
Yeah, it was. I was on cast for this one, and it was surprising seeing Malaysia open up so strongly, but somehow it almost felt kind of inevitable. I feel like every year Malaysia, at least when they make it into bracket, always seem to have a match where they just punch so far above their weight. I mean, they were seed 33, so obviously a very low seed, but they always seem to turn it up in bracket. They seem to be much more of a bracket team than a qualifier team. They kind of ran out of steam though in this matchup though, but early on, like some of their speed abuse was super good. Pleasant no head and that stepping up really well. And also, I want to shout out a player called Chibi Mariko on the side of Malaysia who barely played up until this matchup, but came in for two like very clutch matchups where they did very well here. So some of their fringe players definitely showed up to make that scoreline happen. Wasn't quite enough on the day though for them.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I had this one 5-0 for Sweden in my pick'ems, and I was very quickly proven wrong as Malaysia, as you mentioned, went up 3-1. And they just played a lot better than I think, like you said, anybody expected. It's not like they were squeaking by in their wins either. They looked pretty convincing on their points. They won by 200, 300, and 600k respectively. So they actually looked really good on those speed maps. I think Rampax played incredibly well, as you would expect for Malaysia. But like you said, Dio, unfortunately, Silla just popped off, put up a really good no mod 1 score, first overall in the tournament. And ultimately, Malaysia just ran out of picks and were unable to close it out.
Yeah, I think for me the big difference between the first four or so maps and the next four in this match were like on the first pick. Okay, it's no mod 5. Nobody's getting a really good score, right? Sweden just kind of had two people get 500k, which is really impressive, and they win because of that. But then on the next three maps, all three of Malaysia's wins, Skilla's dropping like 300k on the No Mod 2. He's got less than 500k on the Free Mod 1. He's got 660k on the DT2, which it's a pretty high scoring map. 660k is not a lot. After that, you get 830k on the Free Mod 2 from him with Hidden. You get over a million score on No Mod 1, 5100 FC from him on that map. And then again, over a million score with a Hidden FC on the Free Mod 3 Liar Dancer. It feels like after those three losses, Skilla just kind of said, oh, wait, I'm the best player in Sweden. That's right. Forgot about that for a minute there and just kind of,
Yep.
won the match for them. So in some ways, I feel kind of almost the opposite as you, Doomsday, where it's like I was kind of scared for Sweden, but at the same time, I wasn't really scared for Sweden because I just kind of there's something in the back of your head that says, yeah, no, they'll be fine. They'll still pull out the win even if they're down 3-1.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think Malaysia needed to showcase some points on a different skill set, right? Like they showed some really strong performances on tapping, like Doomsday mentioned, but after that, it was like I was trying to think about, I'm like, okay, where do they go from here? Feels like Sweden, especially with Silla performing, just kind of wipes everything else in this pool, and ended up being the case, unfortunately, for Malaysia. But it was a good showing from them. They've got a lot to be proud of, especially coming in as 33rd seed against a Sweden team that looked very strong in groups.
Yeah, for sure. I do like watching Malaysia when they make it into brackets. I feel like they always have one game like this in them. So it's cool to see them have another great matchup here. It wasn't the win, but it was still very nice. Very nicely played, honestly, for seed 33.
Yeah, it was. I feel like they, kind of showed they can hang with the mid-tier teams in this match, which is good for Malaysia. Let's go ahead and move on to our next kind of highlight match from last week, also in the losers bracket, which was Italy versus Turkey. So Italy won 0 maps in group stage, right? They were the bottom seed in their group in the challengers, which is still top 24 seeding, right? But they were only 23rd seed. They went 0-15 in map score, 0-3, of course, in overall game score. And so this match was really Italy, like, trying to show that they still have some fight in them. And I think they did that here. Turkey's first pick, they only won by 126k, which we'll see here in this clip. Italy got 3 quick points in the middle of this match, but then kind of like the Malaysia versus Sweden match, Turkey just stepped back into control really quickly after those 3 points for Italy. And there was another really, really close map, like 3,300 points on this Nomad 3 in favor of Turkey, where if Italy win that instead, if somebody misses just a little bit earlier for Turkey, Italy win that map instead, and we go to tiebreaker, and who knows who wins that. But unfortunately for Italy, it didn't happen, and the last 2 maps of this match were pretty convincing for Turkey as well. So it really had to happen there, and they just could not clutch it out.
Yeah, I feel like this has kind of been the story for Italy, right? They lost that map by 3,000, but overall they played pretty well. Could have easily brought it to tiebreaker. They lost 3 other maps by less than, or I think 2 other maps by less than 200,000 points. So they were incredibly close to bringing this one to tiebreaker multiple times. Just couldn't manage to pull it off. And it was a similar story in groups for them, right? I don't think Italy played like a 0-15 team. They had quite a few points in the group stage that were incredibly close, that came down to less than 50,000 points. And they just couldn't quite pull it off in the end to kind of get that single point on the board. They've at least done that here. But I think the big pain point for Italy was their free mod 2 pick, which was, I want to say, their first or second pick of the match. And they got absolutely blown out of the water, lost it by 750,000 points. Raikahu full combo the map with Hard Rock. And so I think were it not for that mispick, Italy may have very well brought it to tiebreaker. Now, does Italy win tiebreaker? I'm not necessarily convinced, but I think it could have very easily got there. But ultimately, definitely felt like an Arj versus Raikaho battle. But the big decider is that Turkey had kind of 2 big support carries in Shinkiro and Sprague both played really well, whereas for Italy was kind of just Karochi and Arj trying to fend off those 3.
Yeah, I feel like Raikoho, although of course always in this Turkish team, he's always worth his weight in gold, always so important. You mentioned iFlame, like some of their players definitely stepped up to take the mantle on a few of these maps where it got a little bit dicey. Some of the matches in the group stage, Raikoho was FCing literally everything, but this one, not so much. Although he was certainly the MVP. I see players like Spray and Shinkiro played super well here, and on very important maps where they needed to. Looking at maps like that DT2 Liar coming in, actually nearly getting 1 million on that one as well. Oh god. Shinkiro as well on that Nomad 3, which was super important with it being 3k. Every single bit of advantage counts, and Shinkiro top scored that for Turkey.
Yeah, Italy almost outspun them to win on that map.
Yeah,
that was genuinely spin to win.
It was mad, honestly. I mean, it was a better performance on the points side of things for Italy, but performance-wise, like you said, they could have got a few more in groups. It was just the fact that they got a really hard group with teams that were playing extremely well in that group. Italy honestly got one of the most brutal runs through this tournament. You get out of the higher end of groups and you get Turkey, who are arguably the strongest team coming out of the lower groups.
Yeah.
Maybe Taiwan, but I'd say Turkey are the scariest team. It's a rough draw for Italy, man.
Yeah, I mean, Turkey was top 16 last year, right? Like, this is not a team that I think a lot of people expected to be in the bottom part of the group stage, right? I feel like most people were expecting this team to qualify top 24 at least, given they were top 16 last year. So definitely very scary for Italy. All right, with that, I think we can move on to our last match of the losers bracket. And our only tiebreaker match last week, Thailand versus Japan. This one was really back and forth the entire way through the match. We started off with a breakpoint on this hidden one that we see here. This was by less than 50,000 points, just about 47,000 for Japan on this. And then Japan on their own next pick as well, actually also found this point by only about 57K. There were, a couple of one-sided maps in between some of these, but most maps were, under 200K score difference in this match, which was really, really back and forth basically the entire way through. It was a really, really interesting match to watch just because there was so many back and forth points and so many close points in this match as well.
What a match this was. What a match this was. I think a lot of people had their vote on Thailand simply because, having one hard carry who's so good on most things, the Avila, Sperry, and Chests, who are super reliable, may have looked to give them the edge against a team like Japan, where maybe the carries are spread among a few more of the other players, and you got a lot of newer names on there as well that haven't played so many OWCs. But honestly, I was super impressed with how Japan navigated this. Obviously, it certainly wasn't plain sailing for any team, but some of their more fringe players came into this so well. Not least of which, shout outs to Furman on that tiebreaker. What was he doing? Blocking 17 under combo on that one. Of all players, it's cool to see some of the newer names of Japan really show up in this game against an experienced squad in Thailand.
Yeah, it was such a banger. I mean, I had Thailand taking this one in tiebreaker because I figured these two teams are close, but on tiebreaker, that extra skill cap from Thailand will prevail with less Berry, but it didn't end up being the case. I think Thailand was very close to winning it before tiebreaker. I think, like you mentioned, Dio, they won 2 maps by less than 50K, and whereas Thailand's points were mostly pretty convincing, and interestingly enough, you do kind of expect for Thailand, Lesberry and Chess to be those two standout players to have that higher skill cap and really pull Thailand through this match, but they were 3rd and 4th in terms of match cost. It ended up being ours and Kadama that really stepped up for Thailand this time around, and I mean, for Japan, it was really a strong team performance. They had their first place to 6th place players in terms of match costs were all between 1.3 and 1.6. So didn't have any single player hard carrying. It was just every player on the roster contributing. Even their 7th and 8th best players had 1.2 match costs, so it's not like they were doing nothing either. And it's unfortunate that one of these two teams is eliminated Thailand in this place. I think these were two of the, well, I shouldn't say stronger teams in the lose bracket, but they certainly weren't the weakest teams in lose bracket. But yeah, I got to give another huge shout out to the Furman score on a tiebreaker for Japan.
iFlame, off topic, but I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Who's your internet provider? Like, I got a bone to pick, bro. They genuinely, my internet went out last night in Canada while I was trying to edit the recap video that I did as well. Like, Canadian internet providers, man, I don't know what it is, but we got it bad. We got it bad up here.
It's so bad, man. My internet has been shitting itself since Monday. I'm still waiting to hear back from my building's IT person, but I have not heard anything yet. So I'm just
like genuinely, I don't even blame you because I know how it is. My shit just goes out randomly sometimes. I don't know why. I have completely stable internet most of the time, and then bam, 30-minute outage just out of nowhere. I don't know, man.
At this point, I'm just happy my camera was functional. I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday on video, and my camera was just a green, like half of it was green because the connection was so bad.
Yeah, that's tough. I do kind of want to go back on topic to Kadama and Lesperry for Thailand though. Last year, and if you look at like overall group stage sorry, I need to look at round of 16 performances for Thailand here. During group stage, like Lesperry and Kadama were the two best players for Thailand by a pretty significant margin. And last year in the round of 16, they had like similarly massive performances for this team. They were playing either, all but one or all maps for the team, averaging between 770 and 800K for these two players. Like they were true massive carries for this team. They were up there with like they're in between. They're grouped 13-14 last year in round of 16, in between Mathy and then Shinkiro and Bubbleman below them, right? Like these are really, really good players for this team. That just like didn't happen this time around, right? Kedama was their best performer, as mentioned, played 8 of 9 maps for the team, but also only averaged 577k. Ours, their next best performer, played 6 of 9 maps, only averaged 580k. Lisberry, their third best performer this time around, only averaged 540k. They had nobody in the top 50, whereas last year, Lisberry and Kedama were top 15 for the both of them. So you kind of hate to say it, and I hate to like put it on these two players, because you can always make the argument of, well, other players on the team can step up. But those were the two big carry players last year for this team, and they unfortunately just didn't have the same kind of performance that they had last year. I feel like that's a big part of the reason why Japan won, right? Especially with so many close points in this match. If you're averaging even like 50k higher across the entire match, you win at least 2 more maps if you're Thailand, right? Both of the first picks. So it's a little bit tough, I think, for this Thailand roster, because they're so reliant on these two players. If they happen to have a bad day, right, that's maybe all it was, because in group stage they were the best. If they happen to have a bad day like this, unfortunately your run's over, and that's how it shook out this time around for Thailand.
That's what happens, isn't it? But I suppose, like I say, on the flip side, looking at the other side, Japan being less reliant on a couple more individual players, sharing the load, I suppose. And I mean, in this matchup, everyone played their part. We talk a lot about, some of the lower seeded teams relying a lot, or generally finding their success when they can have one anchor player, right? Well, Japan has shown you don't necessarily need one. Sure, they have a couple standout performers, like somewhat, but for the most part, this is a team where each player does their bit and seems to do it pretty well. So that's a pretty big seeding upset. 7 places is that's not chump change.
No,
it's a big upset.
No, and I kind of want to make a connection here a little bit. I feel like that's the big difference between like a lower seeded team or like a lower tier team in OWC and like a mid tier team, right? A team that gets top 32 versus a team that can kind of contest for top 16. I go back to like Finland versus Peru. Arnold was the single best performer in group stage. He was still incredible in the round of 16. Finland's supporting scores meant they could just pick easy DT maps and completely just smother all of the scores from Peru on those supporting maps, because their supporting scores were just that much better when the FC from Arnold doesn't matter that much. Same goes for like Kazakhstan versus Indonesia last weekend. Indonesia, they don't have one player who FCs all the hardest maps in the pool and gets the best score on Nomad 5 like Kamenchik does, but they can just pick DT1 and DT2 and Nomad 2 and all of these basic easy maps and just get like a 4-way 700k or something, and that's fine, because Kazakhstan doesn't have players who can get 700k on the rest of the pool, even on the easy maps, right? So I feel like that's the big difference, especially when, as you're talking about Doomsday, there's the archetype of like a one big carry player for a lot of these lower seeded teams in the US World Cup. Between a low tier team and breaking into the mid tier is just having that extra support, even if you don't necessarily have the carry player anymore, because you don't really need it most of the time.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing too, because having that one individual carry matters so much for qualifiers when the maps tend to be a fair bit harder.
Yep.
But come group stage round of 16, the maps are just so easy that they can't make the difference individually. And the other issue, of course, is you put so much pressure on them, is that if they have, a single off day, even if they have a slightly worse score on one map, all of a sudden your pick ban is completely falling apart.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to a matchup where I think I'll just let Doomsday take it away. UK versus New Zealand for our next recap match. Yeah, take it away.
Oh yeah, this was a pretty crazy match. Of course, this is UK's first match in the tournament against a New Zealand team which have only been going from strength to strength, really. They had a brilliant qualifier, of course, top 16, which I think was above many people's expectations. And then they ended up in a very tough group in their group stage. They had 3 very experienced teams, Romania, Finland, Indonesia. Many people may have thought New Zealand would have a hard time there, but they topped the group comfortably. And in this matchup, they've shown that they are incredibly confident. Obviously their mechanics, their tapping mechanics, I think they showed in this matchup that they can take it against anyone. UK didn't have a collie bed in this matchup, but the speed maps they won by so much it didn't even matter. whether he was there or not. So this New Zealand team are incredibly good on tapping and incredibly good on mechanics. But they did have some very odd picks in this match, not least of which picking this map you see in here, free mod 2, and then going 3 hard rock on it, which is a very curious choice because it's a really hard map, hard rock. I really don't know why they did that, because UK just played it safe and they've got low AR players that have no problems on AR 8.5 no mod. So it was a curious choice that they went into this, and it was honestly a bit of a shame because they looked so good. They were in control up until this map, and then they kind of lost it, and UK started to sort of pick them apart somewhat. But even then, this map was pretty close as well. It was closing on the No Mod 3 against the UK. They had 2 FCs till the end and then dropped it, I think. Rudge and Bubbleman did. Yeah. A bit more, and they would have stolen that one away on a control map. So they can take them on that as well, but I think that my takeaway on this is mechanics-wise and confidence-wise, New Zealand are looking real good in their matches going forward, and I'm super excited for their match in particular this weekend. I think we're going to be talking about it a bit later, but these guys are on brilliant form.
They are. That No Mod 3 you mentioned ended up being decided by 70,000 points. So had it gone to New Zealand, we would have ended up in a tiebreaker and they would have had a shot there. But I think whenever a team that has not performed super well in previous years heavily overperforms in qualifiers, there's always a bit of initial skepticism, like, oh, is it just a strong qualifier performance, or is this kind of the real deal? But I think through the group stage and round of 16, they've certainly shown that this team is the real deal. They can compete with some of the strongest teams in this tournament. And despite dropping to the losers bracket, they're undoubtedly at this point one of the best teams in the losers bracket by a pretty decent margin. They had some really strong team scores, right? Like they were winning their picks pretty convincingly. Actually, both teams, to be fair, were winning their picks pretty convincingly until that No Mod 3. Both teams had some top scores in the tournament. I think UK had 2 #1 scores. New Zealand had number 2 and number 3 scores. So, they were competitive with even the best teams in the tournament, beating out pretty much all the 1 to 8 teams on certain maps. So I think they've certainly shown they can hold their own. I was really impressed with the performance from Kyujin, who ended up having the top match cost in this map. Just didn't quite have the support that the UK did. And ultimately, it comes back to that support, as it does so often in these early stage matches.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add here. New Zealand did really well. I think a lot of people expected them to, kind of get blown out of the water by the UK. That very clearly did not happen. That was I had felt, actually, this is very funny. I had New Zealand in pick'ems because I'm so far behind in pick'ems that I needed a couple of, Hail Marys, and I figured I'd pick that one as my Hail Mary. I put 3-5, so I still got +1, not too shabby, but not quite correct on the match outcome. But yeah, I think this was a sleeper match in the winners bracket. This next one, though, was not a sleeper match. This was a match that about half of people expected to be an upset, and indeed it was. The only upset in winners bracket, Russia versus China. There's a few things going into this that I think made a lot of people think that this would be an upset. First of all, China's qualifier seed was better this year. They're typically a team that overperforms their qualifier seed at least a little bit. They were, 13th last year. Russia was, I believe, seed 6 last year, and went to tiebreaker against China in the round of 16. Russia had not played a match so far. China were the single strongest team in the group stage this year, and Russia's team overall, generally by the eye test, got a little bit weaker, right? No Ciccone this year, a couple of other players as well who had dropped off the roster for Russia with replacements that didn't kind of match the well-roundedness of some of their other players. That said, on an early stage pool, it doesn't matter quite as much, but it definitely hurts the depth later on. But it's all these kind of small things, right? I think if any one of these things happen, you don't necessarily favor China in this match, but when all of them happen at the same time, it adds up and eventually did make the difference in China taking this match versus Russia. And I mentioned this in the recap video on YouTube, but this is a kind of historic match. The last time that Russia were out of the winners bracket before quarterfinals was 2020, and the same goes for China. Last time they were in winners bracket quarterfinals was 2020. So this is the first time in half a decade we've seen these teams in losers or winners bracket respectively in the quarterfinals, which I think is pretty big for both of these teams. Obviously pretty hugely bad for Russia and pretty awesome for China.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I always look at this Chinese roster over the last couple of years, and they're still, even now, on early stages, they are such a menace. And Russia bumping into them this early on was like this is like the worst time to face this Chinese team, right? Especially when you have a few players on your roster that are, not necessarily mainstays recently, maybe not played too many matches like this on the OS World Cup. This is a bad time to face China, and it showed here. But it still was a great back and forth match regardless. So I think Russia did have like a good showing here. But I mean, as you mentioned, it's just one of those things for these new players. It's a bit of a learning process. They still have a chance to go at it this weekend. Some of the matches this weekend, they might have a chance to maybe have a better chance rather than facing China on like this sort of difficulty of pool. But regardless, I feel like when you look at like these two teams, you see Russia and you think, oh yes, mechanics, speed, tapping, and then you got China. Oh yeah, these guys are hard work monsters. But the maps both teams won were very varied across the skill sets in the pool. There wasn't really one skill set one team was winning and a skill set the other team was winning. It was very mixed. So it almost came down to how they were playing on the day, and I guess China just had a little bit more on the day. But still, it's 5-3. That's close enough to say it really could have gone either way, barring one or two different changes in just circumstance, really. It's not like it's a bad result for Russia. It's just, as I mentioned, it's not often they have to fight from losers bracket this early on.
Yeah, I think the round matters a lot for this matchup. I think, China has not made it past this point in quite a few years, not because they've been a bad team by any means, but because they tend, as you mentioned, Dio, to be lower seeded than ninth place, so end up going against, a top 5 team in the tournament in the second round, and inevitably end up losing that matchup. This time, when you seed ninth and go up against the 8th-seeded team, with China being such a strong early game team typically, as they showed both in groups and in this match, I think their odds were really good going into this one. Now, I do think the later we go into the tournament, the more favored Russia becomes, but they have lost a lot of key players. There were some interesting breakpoints as well. Russia lost DT2 by a pretty significant margin, which was certainly surprising to me because Russia tends to be very dominant on the DTs, and they absolutely were on the DT1 and the DT3. I think they had top scores in the tournament on both of those maps, but China came out on top on the GT2 by a decent margin, 600,000 points. There were 4 breakpoints as well, so potentially some missed picks, but I didn't feel like any of the picks were unreasonable despite the breakpoints. And it's another thing where I think Russia very quickly becomes the scariest team in the losers bracket, especially as the pools start to scale. And it's going to be hard to keep up because Russia did still have a good showing, had some top 2, top 3 scores. And ultimately, it's going to be tough for any of the losers bracket teams to match their scaling as we go further into the tournament.
Yeah. I think if this matchup happened later on in the tournament, Russia would win more often than not. This was China's peak in terms of facing a team like Russia. A very good time to face this Russian squad, really.
And I'm gonna real quick, just because A, we're coming up to our time limit. B, the match for Russia versus Spain is in just over an hour. Pick'ems close in 1 minute and 15 seconds for that match. So if you haven't done your pick'em for that match, maybe you should do it right now. At anyone in chat, I put the link there. So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you guys have said about this match. I do want to note kind of the one funny thing about this match is that Russia actually averaged a higher score than China in this match. They averaged almost 100k higher score than China, had a better average percent max as well. It was just that they won their own picks by a lot more and lost their picks by less, but sometimes that's just how things shake out. We saw something really similar with Thailand versus Japan. In fact, almost the same exact thing. Thailand averaging 70k higher score than Japan in that match, but still losing. Both of those matches, very similar thing happening where the winning team actually has a lower average score. They just had smarter picks. They were able to take a break point when it mattered and clutch things out, or were just very, very slightly ahead on a couple of more maps throughout the course of the match. So that is going to do it for us on the recap as we move into quarterfinals predictions and bring on two other folks with us, Lighton and Miles. Hello, Lighton. How's it going? Hello, Miles. What's up, man?
Hey,
are they here?
That's so awkward. Hey guys.
Hey guys.
I'm glad to be here again. Yeah. Yep, it's going well. Excited for the matches for the weekend. Excited to debate on a few of those matches as well. How are you guys doing?
Good, mate. Good. Just chilling.
I'm ready for real
Glad to
sicko
hear.
hours this weekend. That's what I'm
Yep.
ready for.
I just had
Oh,
an
mate.
interview. That's why I'm dressed so well this time around.
Wonderful.
It's Dapper
Not,
Miles
not
right
on
here.
purpose.
That should be me, really. I'm normally more dapper on a work day, but today's a jumper day because it's bloody cold outside, man.
It is.
I get it.
Well, we're going to do things a little bit differently this time around. We have a new system that we're testing out for this episode where we're going to put all of the flags up all at the same time for all 5 of us on each match. And of course, I need to do this first and then do that. All right, wonderful. So we want to try this system just to see if we could get a little bit more discussion out of it instead of a bunch of individual people making individual cases for why they voted the way they did. So we're going to see if this ends up working or not, and hopefully it works out well. Our first match, New Zealand versus Sweden. This one, 11 UTC Saturday. We talked a lot about New Zealand and how they looked versus the UK, and I think in the context of last week's matches, it's not too surprising that all of us submitted pick'ems with New Zealand coming out on top in this match. That said, I do think this is going to be a pretty close match, right? And I'm not surprised if New Zealand lose this, just because Sweden is one of those dark horse teams. I think both of these teams are kind of a little dark horsey this year, and it feels a little weird to lose one of them this early on. They both have those kind of dark horse characteristics where you have like a really solid core roster for both of them, and then people coming in a little bit on some other maps, right? If you're looking at New Zealand, it's Kyujin, Osbert, Seikyu, and 5Q. If you're looking at Sweden, it's mostly like Skilla, Melwem, Trumpetino, Andros, Lightning Fox, those 5 for the most part. And it's really interesting that these teams have such similar compositions and they kind of play similar game plans, but pick so differently from each other as well. It's a really fun match. I'm looking forward to watching this one.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be much closer than, well, I think a lot of people expect to say close, and I shouldn't say closer than people expect, but I do think, New Zealand has looked really strong. They've had some good performances, but there's obviously going to be the question about their scaling. I think Sweden is also a team that tends to overperform their seeding and do have some good scores over New Zealand. Like, you look at the head-to-head between these two teams from round of 16, Sweden beat them on the No Mod 1 by nearly 500,000, and they beat them on the No Mod 5 as well, again by 300,000, which is a lot on that No Mod 5. It was the Cloud 8 Pauline map. And then same with the Free Mod 2, right? Sweden, it was a smaller margin, but again, beat New Zealand. So Sweden is definitely going to have their picks, right? Dio, you mentioned that both of these two teams have very, very different pick strategies, and I think that lends itself to a very close match. Sweden will inevitably pick the gimmick. They should look pretty good on some of the more aim-focused maps. And so I think although New Zealand is going to be the stronger team and end up taking the match, I think Sweden are certainly going to have their strong picks that they feel confident on. And so I have them getting 4 points in this match. I do think, especially with 2 bans being introduced this week, I think they'll eventually picks into New Zealand right at the end. But get a break point early on with bit of luck or just being really good on the pool, they can certainly take this one over New Zealand.
Yeah, I had 6-4 as well.
Mm-hmm.
I personally had 6-5. Sorry, Miles, you can go.
Sorry, yeah, I have like a 6-2, 6-3 on this one, just because I think Sweden kind of has a poor map pool here going into New Zealand. Like, the Hidden 2 not being a reading map, instead being this kind of half precision, half flow aim pick, I think plays more into New Zealand's strengths. And it's like New Zealand, they only have one true reading pick to ban out in this pool. They have no mod 5, and then you can just pick your poison between all the other like Scylla maps in the pool that you don't want to play. Like, could ban out Hidden 3, could ban out DT4, free mod 2, but they'll probably leave that open and go 3 Hard Rocks again. So I just think this is a more New Zealand favored pool.
I personally put 6 to 5, but I do agree with Miles's point. In general, this map pool is a lot more suited for mechanics teams. As for example, if you're a reading team, basically no mod 5 is getting banned, free mod 2 is getting banned, and then you're just left with just the cookies to eat, basically, right? So a very tough situation for the reading teams in this weekend, but nonetheless, also a lot of flow aim, which is also a little helpful for a few teams as well. But that being said, I still think that Sweden are able to show a good performance here. I personally have a score of 6 to 5. In which case, I think why is New Zealand better? I think yeah, they looked a lot more confident in the last week. They looked really healthy. Sweden, on the other hand, a lot of slip ups from Malaysia, something I did not expect. But I do know that they looked comfortable on this SR, and I feel like Scylla is the man to look out for.
Okay.
Yep, I ain't got nothing else to add to that. That's exactly how I'm feeling. I just trust New Zealand much more on this pool. But yeah, still reckon it'll be close.
And this week is a week of interesting matches, because in the past we all would have said Sweden, and in the past on a match like this we all might have said Japan. But for this one, France versus Japan, we all put France once again. Miles, do you want to start us off on this one, on why France is just looking better this year, especially with this rebuild? They've got some new players. They've got some good new players.
Yeah, and I mean, both of these teams kind of went through some pretty deep rebuilds. I mean, Japan lost a lot of their core players after last year, and for me, I choose France here somehow off of a knowledge gap that's really, really hard. Like, I know I've seen a lot of these French players. I've watched all their matches so far. They've been looking really strong across a lot of different skill sets. You have Musty still going really well. The fact that Musty's playing as well as he is, by the way, is really incredible. 15th year in the World Cup. But for Japan, it's a couple things in my head that make me put France over them in this match. It's like, first off, they, as much as this pool's like structure might favor them, being, as we've mentioned, like a pool that's better for mechanics teams, France's mechanics roster has also looked pretty good. Japan isn't going to be able to run that like straight through the DT pool, no mod 2. If they're able to win all of them, that could be a route into this match. But I think France, while being able to win those mechanics picks, are also going to be able to go into the gimmickier side of the pool. Like if the No Mod 5 is left open, which I doubt, the hidden maps, potentially the Hard Rock 3, all could be good picks for France. While Japan's secondary pick skill set here, I think, is going to be aim. They're going to be looking to pick like a No Mod 1, hidden 1, potentially DT1, who knows, prismatics. There's a lot of interesting picks in this pool for a team like Japan. But ultimately, I just think France has the edge on this one.
Yeah.
To add on to this myself, yeah, sorry.
Sorry?
I think in general, this map pool has also jumped a lot when it comes to difficulty. I think somebody mentioned either in the showcase or in the map pool feedback channel, the jump in terms of the SR and the map pool difficulty is really, really big. And statistically, if you look at the previous stage, Japan, they obviously did good, but France did even better. And I think with this map pool, the map pool being ridiculously hard, I feel like this is the territory where Japan might get skill capped on their non-comfort picks. And I think this is that France could abuse in their favor to take it. I think I have a 6-1 in favoring France. So yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like this is the point in tournament where Japan are going to start to like fall off a little bit, and France have still got room to grow into the harder map pools. I think it is just a case of getting outscaled. I do think Japan will have their maps. Their mechanics should be able to steal a couple picks off France. They could even speed abuse here, but I just think France are going to have too much about them on this pool. They've got players that could deal with this difficulty level very well, and looking at the scores from the matchup against Thailand, they had some good performances on there and some good individual like carries on them. But as a team, I can see them struggling on a few of these maps against a 4 from France. So
Yeah,
I'm reckoning it's gonna be like a 6-2, 6-3, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see this one being particularly close. I think Japan
Mm.
is just getting out of scale at this point. Their scores against the Philippines were, or not Philippines, sorry, Thailand were decent, but none of their scores were super incredible, I'd say. I mean, they had a good, what was it, Hard Rock 2 score, but only 6 teams played the map. So it's hard to say, and that's really about it, right? I mean, maybe they can take 1 point off of France. They have some good players, but France, despite losing 5-2 to the United States, had some really good scores. 5 of the maps they played, they scored top 5 on as a team. They even were first place on the No Mod 4. And, were these two teams playing last round, I definitely would have given Japan maybe a couple more points, but with a big jump in difficulty and France looking relatively good, I don't know. I could see this one being 6-1, very likely, maybe even a sweep.
Yeah, my mind goes back to the qualifiers and Japan's best maps being, at that difficulty of the pool. A lot of the mechanic stuff, you look at Nomad 1, you look at Nomad 2 for them. The Nomad 3, Nomad 4, Hidden 1, Hidden 2, all for France, were both of their qualifier scores being better than both of Japan's. I think Japan can pick Hard Rock in this match, and I think, they can potentially pick like your DT mechanics maps, but everything else in the qualifiers pool, even at that level of difficulty, was really favored towards France. And then looking into the round of 16, right, you go back and look at some of the maps in there. Even on DT1 there, France had the only double S of the round on Jap White, right? They had almost 4 million team score on that DT1. Japan had barely 3 mil. Like, unfortunately, the in-match consistency on those mechanics picks also looks better for France. So I think this is a pretty solid run for France in this matchup. And that is going to take us into a potential matchup, which is why we were really talking about this match, to get into New Zealand versus France, since we are all in agreement on France making it through. And I'll go ahead and once again just take a look at what we had, but I think pretty much everybody also had not France this time around, but New Zealand on this one, I believe, except for Lighten. iFlame, I'm not sure if you had France or New Zealand in this.
New Zealand.
There we go.
Yeah,
There's your screenshot for France. Yeah, this is.
I mean,
I'll go ahead and start on this.
Look.
I think because New Zealand has the advantage on mechanics, they're going to be better suited for the pool, number one. Number two, I think France's gimmick roster is still going to be pretty good. I think these teams are pretty much evenly matched on this pool. I think they're going to be very, very close. But I just slightly favor the core roster for New Zealand, and I think you could get me to vote France on this match pretty easily, because I don't really know which of these teams is going to be better on the weekend, on the day, during the match. And specifically how good the mechanics roster is going to be for both of these teams. What I will say is New Zealand really liked picking into a lot more of the mechanics maps during their match in the round of 16, whereas France, kind of only played the DT1 for themselves, didn't play the Nomad 2 for themselves. New Zealand were putting up really, really solid scores on those maps versus the UK, which I think translates better to this pool than France's scores. But France, number 1 score on the Nomad 4, number 5 on Gladipaling last week. So I feel like their gimmick roster is going to have advantage, and it's really just going to be mechanics versus gimmick, but it should be relatively close for both of them.
I mean, I'll keep it short and sweet. Sorry to cut you off, Doomsday.
Sorry. Okay.
If you look back at round of 16, I think France is the better team, just straight up. The better scores than New Zealand. They had some really strong showings. Obviously, they were slightly better than New Zealand in the qualifiers, but this pool, as Dio mentioned, favors New Zealand, and France has just choked too many times before in this exact position for me to believe in them now. So I think it'll be close, but I think New Zealand will take it in the end.
I've got 6-5. I reckon it goes tiebreaker. I reckon they both trade. And then this tiebreaker is very streamy, very flow aimy, big on the mechanics, and I trust New Zealand on those sorts of maps better. But I am expecting France to really show up for this one, and I'm expecting New Zealand to just keep doing what they're doing, because they just don't care who they're facing. They just keep playing their mechanics. They just keep having a giggle in chat, and they just seem to just get on with business. But I do think this could go either way. I think this is one of the matchups of the whole weekend if it happens. But I have got my points on New Zealand. I got my pick'ems on New Zealand 6-5. I just think they have what it takes on a pressurized tiebreaker, like you mentioned, iFlame. I think if it gets to TB, France might crumble a little bit, whereas New Zealand are just gonna see what happens. They just don't seem to shake too much. Although that would be a test if it came down to that. It'd be a test of this roster if they had to deal with the TB. I reckon they'd do it though.
Yep, that's the exact reason why I put 6-4 France instead of them going to tiebreaker. Yes, the pool does favor New Zealand when it comes to mechanics, but my main reasoning why I put France is that first of all, the team does look a lot more healthy in comparison to previous years. That's the first. The second one is that I think France would be able to contest New Zealand in their own picks. Yes, their mechanics are outmatched. Their hard rocks are really, really good. So that is one thing to consider as well for France. But that being said, those are still contestable. They can still maybe take off a breakpoint or two. And also, yeah, I think another factor that I have is the experience of the players, right? So, yes, New Zealand, they are pure vibes. They are going off strong. They did take 3 points off of the UK, but now when you're facing elimination, this is a bit of a different story because the pressure is there. And in this format, France, it has a lot of players in France, especially Musty. They have been in that format for like a billion times already. They will probably not crumble. The pressure will not get to them. Obviously, for the newer players, it might happen, but I feel like the experience is something to consider. And with that, I put France 6-4.
Okay, for me, I've got just a few things to say about this match. I think this is one of those matches, as we say in American football, any given Sunday. Uh, it's gonna be a match of break points. I have 6-4 New Zealand. I'm with Dio in that you could convince me to put France here. But in this matchup, so we have the big jump from round of 16 to quarterfinals. This is the hardest jump or the biggest jump in map pool difficulty of the whole tournament. France this year really boasts a balanced attack, which has been their approach. There's no one carry who you're looking to on every map to be like, okay, this is the guy who has to combo. But the problem with that when you have a big rebuild like this is now with this big jump in difficulty, we know that their new guys are going to be good on the round of 16 and the group stage difficulty. But now, how are they going to hold up on the 7.3 star pool? I trust players like Flaste. I trust Musty and Fie to continue to be good, and Hivkill as well. But it's going to be on those new guys. If those new guys for France are able to hold their own on this map pool, that's what can win them this match. But otherwise, I see this match going one way, and that's New Zealand banning out the gimmick maps, and then it just being a complete breakpoint fiesta. Like, this match just screams breakpoints for me, because it's like, and I'm edging it out to New Zealand because they have that core where I know that core is not going to get skill capped on this pool, right? Like those 3 or 4 guys on New Zealand who are going to be in almost every map, there is no chance they aren't going to still be able to put up good scores. And I have it edged to New Zealand because the question mark is there for France. Are there new guys up for the task? And if they are, then they can certainly win this match.
All right. We're going to move on to our next match for the sake of keeping time here to get through all of the matches that we want to predict on time for the 20 UTC OWC match, and move on to Brazil-Finland, which is kind of an interesting one. We'll start down at the other end with Miles while I adjust the flags for this match. How about that?
Okay, so for this match, I didn't know too much what to think of this match because Finland, they feel like they've been a consistent package in OWC for a few years now. They get to like top 24 and then they kind of fizzle out once we get to this round in particular because they have that core. They have a core of like Amacetic, Zepe, and everyone else has their maps as well. But you get to the 7.3 star pool. Brazil, I just think they've looked a lot better on the higher skill cap stuff. The qualifiers is the difficulty metric for this round. And seeing the seed 11 versus seed 22 in qualifiers, I just think it was a good gut pick to go with Brazil here, especially on a mechanics focused pool like this one.
Yep. Also regarding the pool, I think it's a little, if not just harder than the qualifiers pool. The quarterfinals pool is really brutal. So, with that being said, I think the main victory point for Finland that they can take is probably trying to go into mechanics. This pool is very, very mechanics. So naturally, you have a really good speed roster, mechanics roster, you have aesthetic, and that is your win condition. However, Brazil also are really good at that skill set. And I think in general, when it comes to the overall comfort with the difficulty of this map pool, Brazil should be a lot more comfortable. We'll also only see like probably Aesthetic and Zepe doing good on this SR. And that's the reason why I put Brazil. I think it was 6-1 as well. But yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like it's bonus points for being a believer, though.
there you
Respect it.
go. You gotta have one
Respect it.
believer. And look, I think I will say it is going to be very difficult for Finland. There's certainly other underdogs in most people's eyes, and for good reason. But I think Brazil just straight up looked pretty bad in round of 16. I mean, you look at their scores, and they were not good scores that you'd expect from an 11th seeded team that were, I think, first place in their group. I mean, almost 5, they were 21st overall. You look at the DTs, DT1, they were 20th, DT2, they were 23rd. Finland absolutely gapped them on pretty much every DT pick they both played by over 1 million points on both of them. So Finland are certainly going to take their points on this map. And I think if Finland have a good day, they are a strong enough team to take this one. I think, the scaling does favor Brazil for sure, but I don't think it's so difficult that Finland will be completely outscaled. There's a chance that they will be, in which case Brazil will just, I think, win pretty easily. But I think I see Finland taking this one in tiebreaker. Definitely a bit of a vibe pick.
Finland have the much better Avatar collab, so they should get a point for that on its own, honestly.
There you go.
Yes, the Moomins, shout out. But I mean, I agree. I think in terms of the speed, Finland are going to have Brazil licked. I'm fairly confident they win at least 2 of those. But I think it's the rest of the pool where they might struggle against Brazil, where they have the ability to cover more the gimmickier side and probably the aim side as well. Certainly on the Hard Rock side with some of their Hard Rock centric players. But Finland are going to have their maps and they're going to take some points. But they need a bit more than speed abuse to beat Brazil, I think, which I think is why I'm not believing this time. But some of these guys on Finland, I'd love to see them pull off an upset here, but I don't see it. I'd love to see it, though.
Yeah, I'll keep mine quick. I think it's Brazil, and I think it's going to be pretty decidedly Brazil. The big reason I say that, even despite, admittedly the scores last week for Brazil were not that good. They were versus Germany. We saw this last year with the UK versus South Korea. They just didn't care and basically, kind of said, well, match over anyway. Toss it. And I feel like that's maybe a little bit what happened here, because Brazil last week was like 2.9 million on the DT2, 2.8 million on the DT1 qualifiers. They were much better than that. They were doing pretty solidly on some of those maps in the qualifiers, that's for sure. And I think we'll be able to have a better time in a matchup where they're not just expecting to get rolled. So that's part of the reason I think this is also going to be Brazil, is I think maybe the scores from last week are not quite so representative of what they are able to do. And now let's move on to our next match in this quadrant of the losers bracket, Norway versus Turkey. And another one where we're going to put up just all the flags at once. And I think we're going to try to keep this pretty quick because we do all have the same outcome for this match. All of us are voting Norway on this one. So I'm going to get those up basically as quickly as I can for us on here. You'll have to forgive me. It's literally just manually clicking them all in OBS, so it takes a second. But yeah, we all have Norway on this one. I think it's pretty obvious why Norway looked very, very good in their group, even though they were versus China. Last week, they had, I believe it was Paper Candle sick with food poisoning in Thailand, and then Hunder, I think it was, like off in Japan or something. So they just were playing with 6 players instead of their full roster, Paper Candle being one of their core 2 players as well, alongside Neneric. Turkey, of course, looked good last week, but they, I think, are just outscaled by Norway, who have Nineric on the roster. Yes, you have Raikaho to match, but I think I prefer Nineric, plus the extra support that Norway has from a lot of their other players, I think is just better than Turkey's.
Yeah, that's pretty much my thinking as well. I do think it's going to be close. I do think Turkey are going to have plenty of maps in this matchup, but I've got like a 6-4. I think Norway are just going to have a slightly better time on this pool, but I think both teams can really pick at the other a little bit, and on their good maps, they can make it real close, steal a few points here and there. But Norway just have a bit more about them, I think. That's really what I'm going off.
Yeah, not too much to add. I think I do think it's a pretty good pool for Norway as well. And I do think it'll be close. I think Turkey have put up some good scores. And I mean, you can never count out Raikaho, who was the 10th best player in round of 16. But ultimately, I think Turkey will just run out of picks, and Norway will be able to close it out.
Yep, as much as it pains me to put Norway, because I really like the Turkish roster, I have to. I mean, on paper, I love everybody from the Turkish roster. Kazakhstan'dan Selim, как говорится, а так. Негізінен, okay, never mind. I should not talk in like multiple languages. That's my bad. But yeah, that being said, first of all, yeah, you have Nineric to match Raikaho, and then the support for Norway is just a lot better when it comes to like every single skill set, especially mechanics. And with this being a mechanics pool, this is not looking good for them. I put Norway 6-3, but I really hope Turkey will show up. And if they will show up, I'm going to be really, really happy.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was dazed out for a sec.
No,
Yeah,
you're good.
basically for the same reasons as everyone said. I think Norway just has a much deeper roster here. I have 6-3 to Norway. Turkey, they're going to get their points. I think they have their maps in the pool, but ultimately it's just a deeper map pool for Norway, and they're going to take this one, I think, pretty decisively.
Yeah, and that is going to bring us to our potential match in this quadrant of the losers bracket, which is Brazil versus Norway. I think, again, despite this looking potentially a little bit one-sided on the screenshot, I feel like this is going to be a pretty close match. Most of us have Brazil, and I'll start here. Both of these teams just kind of had a tough time in the winners bracket last week, both against really good teams that had, you know, a very solid run against them. I think I just favor Brazil's overall core roster a little bit more. I've seen a lot of really good plays from players like Schwick, like Niash especially. I've seen a lot of really good plays from Kurumi W as well. Izzy, especially early stage, not to mention Kriya Maluko still has the ability to just kind of turn it on and pop off like we've seen from him year over year in the past. And there are players like that on Norway as well, right? You have Nineric for that kind of consistency. Paper Candle's been a really big part of their core roster. And then you have players like Hunder who have been, I think, very good for this team. But I feel like there's a few too many more niche players on this Norway roster as compared to like a really wide core roster for Brazil that I think is going to help them with kind of overall higher scoring consistency in the quarterfinals. And that even though, you know, there are some very, very good mechanics maps for somebody like Nineric in this pool, Brazil's supporting scores should be good enough to keep up with some of those and keep a very close match. Big Brazil took out iFlame, by the way.
I'm going to say, yeah, there's the Brazilian mafia there. I mean,
They got him.
They got him. I mean, I guess in terms of this matchup, I'm kind of, in terms of the whole mechanics, the speed mechanics versus Brazil, it kind of feels like Norway is almost like a super Finland with their speed roster. These guys can speed abuse even harder than Finland can. And I think they have a bit more about them in the rest of the pool, so I think they have a much better chance at stealing some of those more left field picks. And of course, they have great skill cap players. But I do think Brazil will have a better time on the rest of the pool, specifically with the other sorts of mechanics, the aim side, and certainly like the no mod control side. You know, the usual sort of no mod 3, no mod 4 ult and tech. I think they might look a little bit better than Norway, I reckon. Norway, I think, again, are going to bully them on those speed picks and are probably going to take a couple of those. And probably still have a couple of other points as well. But I think Brazil will see it out. But it's another good 6-4, maybe 6-3 if Brazil really show up. But it's going to be very competitive. I do think Brazil are going to edge it, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have kind of too much to add. Obviously, I didn't take Brazil in the first matchup, so it wouldn't make much sense to take them in the second matchup. And I guess it's pretty similar reasons, right? I do think the pool is pretty good for Norway. I think Brazil struggled. You could argue that it was because they're against Germany, but I think if you're ever going to beat Germany, it's the first round. So I think Brazil will play much better this week, but I'm just not sure it's going to be quite enough. I mean, I would again take this one going to tiebreaker. I think it's still incredibly close, and I think Norway has to play well in order to beat Brazil.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do a switch up here. As you can see, I
Okay.
had Brazil. I was not aware that a few players were absent from the match with Canada. I was mainly going off the scores that I saw on the stat sheet, and not just that, but yeah, in general. With that being said, I feel like the pool, first of all, favors Norway a lot more. Uh, then I feel like when it comes to the versatility, right? Doomsday mentioned that control mechanics. I mean, like Norway has a really good player for that. You have Anthony W. Anthony W is really good at that, those controls and that like alt skill set, right? Like every single individual on the Norway roster, like both of these matches are like this match in general is like really, really close. And I personally put it tiebreaker, but with the context of a tiebreaker being also very mechanic savvy, and by having a player like Nineric who can show up and absolutely decimate the tiebreaker, I feel like I'm going to give it to Norway. My bad for switching up. I love you, Brazil, but don't come for me.
Your internet's
Watch this
next,
guy's
though,
camera.
Okay, this matchup
5,
is
4.
so weird for me. This matchup is so weird for me because it's like on paper, like this is where I want to say to Norway, I know I have the Brazil flag under me. You guys need to win this match. I said it on the prediction stream at the start. Like Norway needs to win a matchup where they're very closely seated with their opponent, where they're the underdog, because they're great at beating opponents they should beat. But in the last few years, like on matches like this were the matches that Norway would lose. And I've always said Norway, they have great specialized players. Not to say that all their players aren't well-rounded, but like Yokespai and Antony on Gimmick, their speed roster is incredible. But the thing with this map pool is there is so much hybrid in it. There's so much filling out the middle. Like you have this weird rhythmic flow map in the Hidden 3, which is something where I think Norway would prefer that map to be a little more standard. You have flow in the Nomad 4. You have a little bit of control and flow in the HR1. It's like those are maps where it's like you think about it, the maps with more skill sets I just think are going to go to Brazil in this matchup. Like I think they just have more maps. Like Norway, they're going to get on the board, of course. They're going to win their maps, of course. But once this match, like once they get out of their obvious picks, that's where this match is going to really feel like defined for Norway. Like, are they going to win one of those hybrid maps? If they can win the hybrid maps, they can win the match. But I think Brazil just a little bit better at those.
Yeah, Miles, that's like exactly the reasoning why I have Brazil winning this, and it's because those hybrid skill set maps exist, and because they're better when you have a wider, more fleshed out core roster of more players, right? I can name, I think there are just more members of Brazil who you would consider core roster, quote unquote, than members of Norway. And I think that's just really, really helpful when you get into the depths of true sicko losers quarterfinals second round matches.
All right, now I have drinks on it. I think okay. Hunter, DM me or PayPal Hunter if you win this match. Next time you all go out, there's a round on me. However much it costs. However much it costs. Like,
Oh mate,
they have to win this match.
dude, if there's beers on it, I might change my prediction. I think that changes everything, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, that's pressure. That's pressure.
Jesper, just powered up, dude. They're winning.
I don't know. Surely, how much is a round in Norway compared to a round in Brazil? Like, how many rounds can I promise Brazil while this is still relatively even? You know? How many rounds can I promise Korean Maluko in exchange for 1 round in Norway?
Yeah, someone needs to do the conversion.
Yeah.
The ultimate Beerio match right here. What?
Match of the week. And I'm saying this, what I just said, I say it in the same way as my Norway prediction over France, where it's like, I think France needs to win that match. Norway needs to win this match.
Yeah. No, I totally get it, but then at the same time, it's like, Brazil's kind of been on the up and up. They don't even they've not had a year, in a while. Like the last time, I don't have the historical stats up. Let me just grab them real quick. But it's been a while since we've seen Brazil, I think, top 12. It's been a little bit. The last time was 2020 for Brazil top 12. And that was their, top 6 run. Like after that, they've just off the cliff a little bit, down to top 16 or top 24 last year. So I feel both of these teams are hungry, right? Like Norway hasn't had a top 12 run since 2018 either. Their best placement was top 16 last year. So both the teams are hungry. There's placement on the line. There's a round on the line. We'll see how it shakes out.
I need Brazil to win for my wallet now. Apparently, if it's $11 per beer for 8 of them, am I spending $90 on beer?
You might be spending a bit much money on beer, Miles. Let's.
Miles takes out a loan.
I'm a man of my word. But oh god,
in this economy.
Let me go.
Next episode of It's Always Sunny in Jersey, Miles goes down to the advanced payment processor to take out an advance loan to fund Norwegian beers.
With my house as collateral.
If Norway wins, I'll get Miles a beer.
There we go.
Soften the blow a little bit.
Yeah, soften it a little bit.
Thank you.
All right, we go on to our last losers bracket prediction matchup, which is Philippines versus Indonesia. We're not going to take a look at the other losers bracket quadrant match of this because it is Russia versus Spain, which I think the vast majority of people are going to predict Russia to win, and B, which is happening literally right after the stream is over. So instead of watching us yap about it, just go watch the match. We're going to Rados live after this anyway. So Indonesia versus Philippines. This match is, man, like Indonesia, they made it. They made it back into the bracket stage once again. But I feel once more that like there's Indonesia this year. I'll start off with this. Indonesia this year have never beaten a team higher seeded than them and have never lost to a team lower seeded than them. This is the kind of consistency that we've been looking for Indonesia for a while now. Unfortunately for them, that means they are destined to lose this matchup to the Philippines because the Philippines are 4 seeds higher than Indonesia. And by the rule of no upsets, that means that the Philippines will take it. Philippines just looks better. That's really all it is.
Big brother has arrived.
Yeah, there's really nothing to add except me being a little bitter about the fact that Indonesia knocked out my team.
Bro.
But that is about it. They played really well though. That was an honor to play. They played really, really well, and I think they exceeded a lot of people's expectations. But I think this is where their journey ends. Philippines are just a boss battle for them. I mean, look at Rothschild, look at Nathan Ram. Like this is gonna be scary for Indonesia.
Yeah, I mean, Philippines looked better in qualifiers. They looked better in groups. They looked better in round of 16. It's not going to change now. I think the scaling, if anything, hurts Indonesia a lot more than it hurts Philippines. So I think Indonesia, they'll get their points. I have this one 6-3 personally, but I think Philippines should take this one without too much struggle.
I mean, you look at the qualifier, like certain scores between the teams. You look at Indonesia winning some of the more control no mods and things and some of the hiddens, but in bracket it doesn't really look like that's going to be the case. Really, it feels like Indonesia's chances are more going to be taking on the Philippines on more of the mechanics maps, and they might take a couple, but it does feel like Philippines are going to scale harder here. As a 4, they do look better. So I do think Philippines should have this one. Hoping for a good fight though. It's cool to see Indonesia sort of, I guess, shed the shackles of choking after some of the earlier matches and having a good match against Kazakhstan. They played well there. Might be a step too far for them here, though, I think.
Anyone else? No? All right, let's move on. Look, Indonesia have done very well this year, but unfortunately Philippines is just, I think, as you guys have said, very, very high scaling team. And that gives us a little bit of extra time, maybe about 10 minutes each, to cover our 2 winners bracket matches that we wanted to touch on. The first of which is Australia versus South Korea. This is another one where, like, we all have the same team for this one, and I'll spoil it. It is all Australia. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like this match is particularly one-sided. I think especially because in the losers bracket, we talked a lot about the scaling benefiting the higher skill cap team. These teams are now high skill cap enough that the scaling doesn't really benefit either of them, because both of them can still play the pool, right? Like, these are the teams that you expect to have 4 players on every map up until maybe finals weekend or semifinals weekend in some cases, and then maybe they start having some trouble. In Australia's case, they're expected to just top 3 the tournament. Neither of these teams are going to have all that much trouble on this pool. I feel like we're going to see breakpoints here, but I feel like Australia is just so ridiculously strong that it's not really going to matter all that much what South Korea does, and they'll probably just get a breakpoint by dropping 4 million team score on something when South Korea drops 3.8 million team score on something instead, and then they win the match 6-4 because of that. Like, I feel like that's how this match goes. Let me know how the read is. Like, I feel like that's just the read for this match.
I think that sounds about right, honestly. That sounds about right.
New Zealand versus France, the third?
What? What?
Low key, there are some similarities. Australia with that kind of unshakable core. South Korea with a lot of newcomers that have yet to be proven on this sort of SR, I guess. Is Chipori a name change?
Chipori is Parisia.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, everyone on this team has played before except my keyboard. That's the only true rookie for South Korea.
Okay, so never mind. This is not New Zealand versus
No,
France.
no, I was so confused.
I was confused by that as well.
I was saying that if Australia is going to lose a round, it's going to be this one. Like, South Korea is historically a very strong team at this SR. And Australia is going to have to play their best, but I don't really see the world where they lose this one. But I'm with Dio. This is going to be breakpoint hell. It's going to be like 6-3, 6-4, ugliest match of the week, but we're all going to love it. So,
yeah, I personally have it 6-3, and I think the main reason why I decide to give it to Australia instead of South Korea is because of the map pool again. As I've said prior, the map pool does favor the mechanics teams, and when you think about Australia, you think about those mechanics, you think about those speed, those aim, those tapping, and etc. And for South Korea, you think of like control, maybe like some more gimmicky stuff, right? So, with that being said, yes, South Korea has a good mechanics roster by itself, but does it scale up to the strengths of Australia? I think not. And with the flow aim also being present heavily in this map pool, I think Australia just have the edge. And if it was like any other map pool, I would consider giving it to South Korea. But I think here I will opt to go for Australia just because the map pool is just so Australia pilled.
Yeah, I
Now-
would kind of. Go ahead.
Okay, as I say, now here's how South Korea could still win.
There we go.
They sprout speed legs and start dropping 4 million on these speed picks, which I somehow don't see. I think that I don't know if they were missing a couple players against Chile, but they kind of got fourth manned on things like the DT2 a little bit. Against Australia, you can't really afford to do that and still win a point. The rest of the pool they'll have a great shot on. Their control rosters could definitely take on Australia on this level of difficulty. They could definitely still break points on those. But again, it's a good pool for Australia. There's a lot of good Australian mechanics maps here, and I think they're just gonna have a bit too much on this pool. But I think it's one of those matchups where a slightly different variance on some of those picks. Maybe if say the last pool where there wasn't really like a proper sort of normal-ish BPM, 200-ish BPM stream map, things like that, it could be even closer. But it's a good pool for Australia to face South Korea on. But I still reckon it's going to be a banger. It's going to be very competitive, but I think South Korea are probably going to be just a little bit short here.
Yeah,
That's what I'm thinking.
pretty much the same. I'm thinking Australia's taking it 6-4, and I really do think the pool makes a difference. I think at these early stages, especially, both these teams are so good that neither of them are going to even come close to being outscaled. And I mean, it's going to be such an exciting matchup either way. I do think South Korea actually has a very realistic shot at winning this. All it takes
Yeah.
is a slight off day or a couple off maps from Australia, and all of a sudden, South Korea is either winning 6-4, going to tiebreaker. If they do go for tiebreaker, I think I would still favor Australia because I think they probably have a better shot in this tiebreaker. But these were two of the most exciting teams to watch last week. South Korea, if you look at their scores, they were first on Nomad 3, second on Nomad 4, third on Hard Rock 1, and they were fourth on Free Mod 3. Even though they had the fifth best average score, it was pretty much only dragged down by their DT2 scores. Otherwise, I think they would have been second best. And then Australia, of course, they had the best average score last week. They were second on the Nomad 2, second on the Nomad 5. They were first on DT1, as well as Free Mod 1 and Free Mod 2. They were second. So there's definitely going to be a bit of a battle of the Titans for this matchup. And whoever wins, I can't wait to watch it.
Oh my god, yeah. Dude, this is going to be so good. The scores are going to be amazing on it. I can't wait. I can't wait to see this one all pan out. It's an early matchup, so I guess it's one of the early days for the NA folk, but it's worth it, trust.
Yeah, and I feel like both these teams are going to be so well prepared for this match. I think they're both going to be going into this match feeling like it's absolutely winnable. And it means a lot as well, you know. For South Korea, this is going to be your best shot, I think, if at getting in. Obviously, they're going to have a pretty good time in the losers bracket, but this is your best chance to upset the highest team. Obviously, the further you go to the tournament, the harder it's going to be. Their next opponents would be the United States. So, your best chance of beating a higher seeded team is now, because I do think, you know, the Australia, US is in Poland. When they're likely to meet South Korea again, looking at something like the finals pool realistically, I think they are going to start to get slightly outscaled by those top three. So I think they know this is going to be their best chance, and they're going to put in a lot of effort grinding this pool, I'd imagine.
Oh, I think you muted, Dio.
I am indeed. Thank you. Don't have too much more to add. I will quick correction there that Su Young is actually also a rookie for the South Korean roster. So they do have two rookies, but yeah, I don't think that matters too much. There's some new players for Australia as well. It's much more, I think, just the map pool is a little bit better for Australia. The top three are just that good in this year's World Cup compared to everyone else. We've seen the consistency for these top three teams work out that well also. Like Australia was the number one team on the round of 16 pool. They had the best average score. It was them in Poland, and then the next best was like over 200k average score lower than either of those teams, right? Like this team is just kind of insane. So I feel like there's, unfortunately for South Korea, you're matching up against one of, I think, the two teams who this early on just are not going to lose the matchup. And Australia happened to get third seed instead of, say, second seed, where I think United States has a little bit more early stage inconsistency as compared to a team like Australia, which we saw last week, right? So unfortunate for South Korea there, and totally agree that by the time they see another one of these top three teams, if they happen to win this match, they're probably losing in semifinals because the scaling starts to be an issue. And then if you go down to losers bracket into the finals week, that at that point, I think really just sends you packing, because the scaling there is going to be pretty ridiculous for all of these teams. So yeah, that is going to be it for South Korea versus Australia. And now we go to our final matchup of the stream, final prediction of the stream, and the last one for the winners bracket as well, Canada versus Germany. We've got a pretty even split here this time around. Actually, we've got a pretty even split this time around. And you know, there's maybe a potentially a bit of bias here because we have two Canadians on the cast, but try to keep it surely as unbiased as possible with zero shenanigans, right? Surely. Let's start with Miles. How's it going, man? What do you have?
Hey, so for this match, I believe I have something along the lines of Germany 6-4 or 6-3. And I would like to say that for all intents and purposes, teams with newcomers are France and teams with strong cores are New Zealand. So this is the fourth instance of New Zealand versus France in this weekend.
Miles is just seeing New Zealand versus France everywhere, guys.
It really
He's
is.
Yeah, it's like
traumatized.
I close my eyes, I open my eyes, I only see one matchup through this whole weekend. It's yeah, I mean, a lot on the line here for Canada this week. I mean, traditionally when Canada has their good years, one of their boogeyman teams is Germany. And this is it's a matchup where it's just going to be the proving grounds for a lot of these new players on Canada. These guys who have a lot of hype, a lot of momentum around them. Looking at like Sparkly Fairy, like Pink Eye Fan, uh Nujabes, I forgot what his other name was.
TS Fury.
TS Fury, yeah, big match for him. Where, as we've been saying this whole time, very flow, very mechanics heavy pool, which would go in favor a team like Germany. And when Canada and when you're looking at the top end of both of these teams, a lot of people are going to be looking at like the Zudinator versus Kriller matchup because both of those on it feels like any given map they can pump out like a really good FC, especially on this SR, two of the strongest players of the tournament going at it. So it's going to be everyone else to really put their best foot forward and try and take this match for their team. I just think it's Germany based on the map pool. But if the Canadian players, we've seen them overperform time and time again. If they're going to take out their boogeyman, I feel like now's a really good time to do it in the quarterfinals round before they can really skill cap you, which is what's happened to them a lot in the past. I think they're all going to be able to play this 7.3 star pool. And if they can play well, could be a good time to beat up that boogeyman of theirs.
Yep. I guess we're going from right to left, which is coincidentally Germany and then the Wall of Canada. Funnily enough, I do believe that Germany have an edge once again due to the map pool once more. Because first of all, yeah, you have those mechanics, you have that flow aim, and flow aim in general does favor Germany significantly. They got a #1 score in OMOD 2 and a really good score in HR1 in qualifiers. The only flow aim map that was different was DT3, but even then, that was more old style flow aim and it was DT flow. So there's that to consider. Also, adding to that, when you're Canada, yes, you have a really good gimmick and reading roster. You have really good hiddens in general. So what you have is, for example, you have a matchup. You are playing against Germany. Germany bans no 5 and Fremont 2, for example, or maybe like a DT4. The hidden one is very generic. Practically, you cannot use your hidden comfort advantage to that, and Germany will probably still be a really big threat on that map. Hidden 3 is also like a Kriller map, basically, and then Hidden 2 is Precision, which you might have a good chance on, but still, it is really, really tough for Canada. The map pool is just so heavily Germany favored, and I think this is a little sad for Canada here, but I do think they can still pick up like 2 to 3 points, but I do favor Germany in this matchup.
2 to 3 points. I can't believe this slide in. How could you?
I'm sorry,
Look.
man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This map pool is just tragic for them.
It is definitely a little rough for Canada, but look, these two teams, they've played a lot in the past. Right? This is a pretty historic matchup. Traditionally, Canada, Germany, they both make it to finals. Canada plays Germany in the finals, and they get outscaled by Germany in the finals. That's kind of Canada's OWC, every single year. But this year, copium is that Canada is the early stage team historically. They are meeting in an early round this time. This is going to be their best chance to beat Germany. Zudinator individually has been the best performer of anyone on these two teams. And by a pretty decent margin, at least in the qualifiers and round of 16 as well. Even though the pool favors Germany, Canada still have players who are capable of playing this. I don't think they're going to be, they're not going to be outscaled on a pool like this one, especially with a player like Quandirio, who I think is pretty good at these more kind of flow aim and mechanics focused maps. It'll definitely be a lot of pressure on a player like Wandirio to perform, but if he kind of has a shot. I do think it'll be close either way. Have this one going to tiebreaker. Maybe a bit of hope there because I just want to see a tiebreaker in this matchup. I think that would be a lot of fun. But I can't not predict Canada. That's just how it goes.
You see, I mean, I see Miles and Lighton using facts and logic in their prediction, which is understandable. I've personally decided to go with vibes and hope, but again, I'm kind of in the boat with iFlame here, where I don't know, this round of the tournament just feels like Canada's zone, the happy place where they do their best work, the zone where they completely destroyed USA one year against everyone's expectations and predictions, and it's hard to bet against Canada here. I mean, I do agree this pool is very good for Germany. Their mechanics players are going to have a field day on this. There's no low AR or true low AR hidden for Canada to use, which has actually somehow ended up being a really good map for them in recent years. That AR9 map in there isn't exactly that, although it should still be pretty good for them. I'm just feeling the Canadian win in my gut here. Surely they have to beat Germany at some point. They can't just keep losing to them. I feel like this is the moment. Although I can also understand why people think this is looking really good for Germany. So Hopium says 6-3 Canada.
And you know, I think the Hopium is correct. As is tradition, when there's a tough matchup for Canada, you bring out the Canadians t-shirt and you know, you just have to run with it. You just have to run with the Canadians. Get out the Canadians t-shirt, get out the Bruce Trail hat, and put on your full Canadian garb, and recognize that the last time that Canada was beaten by Germany in around before semifinals was in 2018, which is back when we still had group stage, before this year's group stage. It was also back when Vinxis was still playing OWC for Team Canada. That's how long ago it was. This matchup is very different from the late stage Germany outscaling Canada matchups that we have had in a lot of recent years. I just have a hard time betting against Canada on what is still going to be a pretty early stage pool. They are one of the best early stage teams that we have in OWC. We've seen them upset Germany in 2023, USA in 2023. I think they had a worse time last year for sure, but I still believe in the Magic for sure. Looking at the scores from these teams in qualifiers, of course, it's very, very close. Even though Germany, we think of them as this really good mechanics roster, in qualifiers, DT1, both of Canada's scores were top 10. Germany had number 11 and then number 28. DT2, Canada had number 3. Germany had number 4, and then we're both down at number 21 and 30 for Germany and Canada, respectively. I think there's still a lot of really good flow aim maps for Canada, which is not something that they're bad at. You look at some of the more flow aim focused picks in the pool, especially anything slightly lower BPM. Canada can play those very, very well. And especially, again, your sort of lower AR reading maps. Unfortunately, there's not one in the hidden pool for Canada this time around, but there is still that density, like Doomsday pointed out. I think there's ways for them to win this match. Do I think they win it 100% of the time? Absolutely not. I'm not surprised if Germany wins this match because, you know, it's Germany. They're a very good team. They're one seed apart, right? We're split for a reason, but at the end of the day, it's hard for me, even if I wasn't Canadian, it's a little hard for me to give Germany a definitive edge in this match just because Canada's early stage in the last few years has been very, very good, and they have beaten Germany in the early stages of the tournament already. So I think even without bias, you know, I'm not necessarily giving Canada the win, but I don't give Germany a definitive edge in this matchup. That's for sure.
I forgot about that. They just massacred USA on this stage 2 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, 6-1, by the way, 2 years ago against USA. So that's not too long ago. And again, the last time Germany beat Canada before semifinals was 2018. So I think there's definitely a very real possibility of a Canada win. I think there's also a very real possibility of a Germany win. I think there's going to be more people predicting Germany overall. I think that's going to be the pick'ems, like 60-40 or something, but not surprised at either outcome. Rooting for Canada in this match.
Please, TB, we need this match.
Please, tiebreaker. I need to see
Has to happen.
Zudinator gap everyone on tiebreaker. Please, tiebreaker. Thank you.
Yeah, man, dude, this is prime time as well. This is like, if you're gonna watch one match this weekend, I mean, this is probably a really good one to pick if you can make just one. Although a possible one involving, the second match of New Zealand could also be a shout if it happens. It's this is going to be a barnstormer. There's no way this doesn't end up being a banger. Surely,
All
can't
right.
see it either way.
Any closing words? We got about a minute until this first match of OWC starts off. I've definitely said my piece. If anybody has anything left to say about this match,
Anyone willing to put a wager on Spain versus Russia?
are we talking
No.
win and loss?
We
or are
believe in
talking
Aleph
point amount?
supremacy, my boy. Dude, Spain are the protagonists of this tournament.
They kind of are.
might
You're
be-
not
they might
wrong.
be, yeah.
Unfortunately,
But
they
they're
met
so
Russia.
dull, Yeah,
So they're against Russia.
yeah, they get
Yeah,
it's
the
kind of over.
strongest team of the losers bracket right now. It's gonna be tough.
Hey,
Maybe like
because
Russia
TB.
Philippines could be fun, but yeah, like if Russia Philippines, the potential could be interesting, but that's a whole different story.
All right, that is going to do it for us. Thank you, everyone, for watching Full Circle. Unfortunately, I don't have raid permissions on the Corsace channel, so just click the link. I put it in chat. Go watch OS Live. Russia versus Spain happening right now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for everyone for being on here, and we'll see you next week for more predictions and recaps.